All right, so today we're going to really dig into getting to, yes,
Yeah.
negotiating agreement without giving in
Oh, yeah. Classic.
by Roger Fisher and William Ury.
Big names.
This book has been hugely influential for decades,
Mm-hmm.
and we're going to unpack some of the best takeaways
Absolutely.
so that you can walk away from this deep dive
Yeah.
and use these insights to tackle your next negotiation.
That's the goal.
Whether you're haggling over a used car
Right.
or, maybe not quite a peace treaty,
Yeah. Well, maybe.
but you get the idea.
Uh-huh. I get it.
Now, you wouldn't be here if you didn't want to improve your negotiation skills.
True.
And luckily,
Mm-hmm.
we have our expert with us today,
Happy to be here.
who is a pro at putting all this into practice.
That's right.
So let's start with what makes this book so groundbreaking.
Oh,
This
yeah.
whole concept of principled negotiation.
Yeah. So with principled negotiation, it's really about changing your mindset.
Okay.
Moving away from that tug-of-war feeling where it seems like one side has to lose for the other to win.
Right.
Instead of digging into your positions,
Okay.
you're working together to find a solution that benefits both sides.
So it's less about that I win, you lose mentality.
Exactly.
And more about finding a way where everyone comes out ahead.
Yeah, think of it as collaborative problem solving
Interesting.
rather than a battle of wills.
Okay. I like that.
And the cool thing is that even decades later, these principles are still incredibly relevant.
That makes sense though, right?
Yeah.
Because human nature doesn't really change.
No, it does.
I mean, we all have needs and wants.
Absolutely.
And if you can find a way to satisfy those on both sides,
Mhm.
it just seems like that would be a recipe for success.
Yeah, and the intro by Ulrich Egger points out
Oh, yep.
that the book's principles are applicable across cultures because it focuses on those win-win solutions.
That's a great point.
Yeah, it really is about understanding human behavior.
Okay, so the book goes on to talk about separating the people from the problem.
Oh, this is key.
I mean, it's so easy to get caught up in the emotions of a negotiation,
Oh, yeah, definitely.
which can then lead to those positional standoffs.
Absolutely.
Where nobody's willing to budge.
Yeah, you dig in your heels.
I've been there.
We all have.
It's almost like the negotiation becomes a battle of egos, and everyone loses sight of what the real issue is.
Exactly. And the book uses a brilliant anecdote to illustrate this point.
Okay.
It's the story about two people arguing in a library.
Oh, yeah, I remember that one.
One wants the window open, the other wants it closed.
Classic.
They get so fixated on their positions, on how much to open it, that they completely miss the underlying interests.
It's such a simple story,
Yeah.
but it really captures what happens in so many negotiations.
It highlights how focusing on positions can block you from seeing a potential agreement.
Right.
In the library story, it was the librarian who finally asked why.
Okay.
Why did each person want what they wanted?
Right. Getting to the heart of it.
Exactly. And that's what unlocked the solution.
So what did they want?
Well, it turned out that the first person wanted fresh air,
Okay, makes sense.
while the second person wanted to avoid a draft.
Oh, I see.
Once the librarian understood their interests, she was able to find a win-win solution.
So simple.
She opened a window in a different room,
Oh, that's clever.
allowing for fresh air without a direct draft.
So it's really about understanding the motivations behind people's positions.
Yeah, and recognizing that emotions are driving the conflict.
That's a great point.
And sometimes just acknowledging those emotions can be the key to de-escalating the situation.
So then you can shift the focus to those underlying needs.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The book really drives home the point that emotions are inevitable,
They are.
but you have to manage them.
Right. Manage it, don't ignore.
Yeah, there's another great anecdote in the book
Okay.
about a union rep trying to figure out why a worker named Schmidt was always being pulled from his regular team.
Okay, interesting.
It turned out the foreman, Meyer, considered Schmidt his best worker
Okay.
and would only call on him for crucial tasks.
I can see where this is going.
Yeah, so Meyer thought he was doing Schmidt a favor by giving him more responsibility.
Ugh.
But Schmidt felt singled out and resentful.
It's all about perspective.
It really is.
Meyer was assuming that Schmidt enjoyed the challenge.
Right, and that's what led to the misunderstanding.
This is a classic case of assumptions fueling conflict.
Absolutely, and it's
Yeah.
something we need to be mindful of in any negotiation.
So how do we prevent these people problems from derailing the entire negotiation?
Well, the book emphasizes that behind every position, there's a multitude of interests.
Okay.
And if you can uncover those interests, both your own and the other side's, you can often find common ground that can be the foundation of an agreement.
So it's about going deeper than just the surface level of what people are saying.
Yes, exactly. It's about understanding what's really motivating them.
Okay, that makes sense.
The book uses the example of a tenant and a landlord negotiating a lease.
Okay, a pretty common situation.
Right. And on the surface, it might seem like their interests are opposed.
Yeah, I mean, the tenant wants lower rent,
Right.
and the landlord wants higher rent.
But if you dig a little deeper, you'll find shared interests.
Really?
Yeah, these shared interests can lead to creative solutions.
I wouldn't think a tenant and landlord would have that much in common.
Well, think about it.
Okay.
They both want stability.
Okay. Yeah, I guess that's true.
The tenant wants a place to live long-term,
Right.
and the landlord wants consistent rental income.
Makes sense.
They also both want the property well-maintained.
Yeah, that's true too.
And both benefit from having a good relationship.
Okay, so by identifying those shared interests,
Exactly.
it can start to move beyond that adversarial mentality,
It's about moving away from that fixed pie mentality.
where one person's gain is another person's loss.
Right.
Getting to, yes, challenges that assumption. Instead, it encourages brainstorming and generating multiple options before settling on a solution.
Yeah, the idea is to expand the pie and find mutually beneficial trades.
I remember that example in the book about the stalled labor negotiation.
Oh, yeah, classic example.
It seemed like the situation was impossible.
It did.
Both sides were so locked in their positions.
They were, but then
Yeah.
they brought everyone together for a brainstorming session
Oh, interesting.
and started generating creative solutions.
I'm curious, what kind of solutions did they come up with?
Well, they came up with ideas like empowering foremen to resolve complaints immediately,
Okay, that makes sense.
granting union reps access to break rooms for meetings, and requiring management and union leaders to meet before any strike action.
So they were addressing the underlying needs of both sides,
Exactly.
and that helped them move towards an agreement that was mutually beneficial.
Yeah, and it all started by thinking outside the box.
Instead of fighting over a limited set of options, they opened up a whole new realm of possibility.
It's like that saying, if you only have a hammer, everything looks like a nail.
Right.
But if you get creative and think outside the box.
Then you can start to see things from a new perspective.
Exactly. And that's when the real breakthroughs happen.
That's a great point. I think we're going to have to leave it there for now, though.
Okay.
But we'll pick up this conversation in the next part of our deep dive,
Sounds good.
where we'll explore even more insights from getting to yes.
I'm looking forward to it.
Stay tuned.
Yeah, stay tuned. It's like you're looking at a puzzle from all these different angles.
And suddenly the pieces start to fit together in a way you didn't see before.
You get a new perspective.
Speaking of seeing things from different angles,
Yeah.
the book really emphasizes this idea of using objective criteria.
Absolutely.
So instead of just battling over subjective opinions, Getting to Yes says we should try to use objective standards
Right.
as a way to break those deadlocks.
And reach fair agreements.
So it's like, instead of just saying, I think it's worth this much,
Yeah.
you could point to things like market value,
It's
and
exactly.
scientific data, or
Yeah.
industry standards,
Things that are grounded in something more substantial.
more than just personal preference.
Right. Because anyone can just say, well, I think it's worth this.
Exactly.
But if you can back it up with evidence,
Right.
then it carries a lot more weight.
It's like you're saying, look, it's not just me saying, here's the data,
Exactly.
and that can really level the playing field.
It can. Especially if you're dealing with someone who's trying to take advantage of you.
Okay, so give me an example of how this might play out in a real negotiation.
Well, the book uses the example of a homeowner who was disputing the depth of their house foundation.
Oh, yeah, I remember that one.
So instead of just going back and forth with the contractor based on their gut feeling.
Right, which can get pretty messy.
It can.
Because everyone thinks they're right.
Exactly.
And nobody wants to back down.
So in this case, the homeowner insisted on referring to the building codes for the area.
Okay, so they brought in some objective data to support their argument.
They also looked at the soil conditions and even the foundation depths of comparable houses in the neighborhood.
So they were basically saying, look, this is the standard.
Right.
This is what everyone else is doing.
Exactly. And by appealing to these objective standards, they were able to reach a resolution that felt fair to everyone involved.
And it was grounded in something more concrete than just their opinion.
Exactly.
So that's a really good tactic to keep in mind.
It is.
Especially if you're in a situation where you feel like you're not being heard.
Or if you're dealing with someone who's being unreasonable.
Okay, so let's say we're using objective criteria. And we're trying to stay focused on the problem, not the person.
Right.
But what if the other side just seems to hold all the cards?
Ah, yes. That's where your BTNA comes in. It
BTA.
stands for your best alternative to a negotiated agreement.
Oh, right, right. I've heard of that.
It's essentially your plan B,
Okay.
what you'll do if you walk away from the negotiation table.
So it's not about giving in.
No.
It's about knowing what your options are if the deal falls apart.
Exactly. And here's the key. The stronger your BATNA, the more leverage you have.
That makes sense.
If you know you have a solid alternative, you're less likely to cave to pressure.
Or accept a bad deal.
Right, because you know you don't have to.
It gives you that confidence.
That quiet confidence.
Like you have an ace up your sleeve.
Exactly.
You don't have to be desperate to make a deal.
Because you have other options.
The book gives that great example of the homeowner who is considering selling their property for less than they had hoped.
They weren't happy with the offer.
Now, what did they do?
They negotiated a right of first refusal to buy back the land
Interesting.
if the developer ever decided to sell it later on.
Okay.
So that right of first refusal became their BATNA.
So even though they might have had to accept a lower price in the present, they were protecting their interests in the future.
Exactly. It didn't get them the price they wanted initially,
Right.
but it gave them leverage and peace of mind.
That's a really clever strategy.
It is, and it highlights how a strong BTNA can completely change the game.
It's like you're not putting all your eggs in one basket.
And getting to really drives home the point that walking away from a bad deal can sometimes be the smartest move.
You don't have to settle
You don't.
if the terms aren't favorable to you.
And that's a powerful message.
It is. It's about knowing your worth
Absolutely.
and not settling for less than you deserve.
And I think that's a good place to pause for now.
All right, so we've covered a lot of ground in this section.
So you have?
Talking about objective criteria and the importance of having a strong BTNA.
Those are key takeaways.
But, you know, we've been operating under this assumption that everyone's playing fair.
Right. Following the rules?
But let's be real, not everyone does.
Unfortunately not.
So how does getting to yes address those tricky negotiators?
Ah, yes, the ones who try to pull a fast one.
Exactly.
Well, the book dedicates a whole section to those dirty tricks.
Oh, yeah, those underhanded tactics.
The ones that people use to try and gain an advantage.
I bet our listeners have encountered a few of these in their own negotiations.
I'm sure they have.
So what are some of the most common ones?
Well, there's deliberate deception,
Okay.
where someone might outright lie about something.
Not cool.
No, not at all.
What else?
Psychological manipulation,
Oh, boy.
using guilt trips, or playing on your emotions.
Oh, I hate that.
Yeah, it's not a fun tactic to deal with.
And it can be really effective.
It can be.
If you're not aware of what's happening,
Right.
what other dirty tricks do they talk about?
Pressure tactics,
Okay.
like trying to force you to make a decision quickly.
Before you've had time to think it through.
Exactly. Or even making threats.
Wow. Okay, so we're talking about some pretty serious stuff here.
We are, but the good news is that getting to yes also provides strategies for countering these tactics.
Okay, so we don't just have to sit there and take it.
No, you don't.
So how do we fight back?
Well, one of the most important things is to simply recognize what's happening.
Okay, awareness is key.
It is, because once you know what you're dealing with, you can start to take steps to protect yourself.
So how do we do that?
Well, one helpful tip is to simply name the tactic.
Okay.
For example, if someone's trying to pressure you with a fake deadline,
Oh, yeah, that's a classic.
you could say something like, I understand you're trying to create a sense of urgency, but I'm more interested in finding a solution that works for both of us.
That's a good one.
It acknowledges the tactic without getting emotional.
Right.
And it takes away its power.
It's like you're saying, I see what you're doing, and it's not going to work on me.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I like it.
The book also talks about the importance of having a clear and well-defined process for the negotiation.
So you're setting the ground rules from the start.
Yes,
Yeah.
and by agreeing up front on things like how you'll handle disagreements or make decisions, it makes it harder for someone to throw you off balance.
Right. They can't just change the rules in the middle of the game.
Exactly. It's about maintaining control of the process.
Okay, so let's say we've tried all of that.
We've named the tactic. We've set clear ground rules. But the other side is still being totally unreasonable.
Well, then might be time to walk away.
Seriously.
Sometimes the best way to counter those dirty tricks is to simply walk away from the negotiation.
So you're saying that sometimes the best negotiation is the one you don't have?
In a way, yes. If someone is consistently resorting to those underhanded tactics, it might be a sign that a mutually agreeable solution just isn't possible.
And remember, you always have that BATNA.
Your safety net.
You don't have to participate in a negotiation that feels unfair or disrespectful.
And sometimes walking away, especially when you have a strong BATNA,
Yeah.
can be the most powerful move you can make.
Yeah, it really is about changing the way you think about negotiation.
It's not just about winning or losing.
Right. It's about finding that solution where both sides feel like they've gained something.
And that's why this book is so timeless.
Absolutely.
It's not just about tactics. It's about a whole mindset shift.
And that mindset can be applied to so many different situations.
Oh, yeah.
Business deals, personal relationships.
Anytime you need to find agreement with someone.
Getting to
Yes.
can be helpful.
It's a really valuable tool.
So let's do a quick recap of some of the key takeaways.
Okay, sounds good.
We started by talking about principled negotiation.
Right, moving away from that positional bargaining style.
And focusing on solutions that work for everyone.
Collaborative problem solving.
Exactly. And then we talked about the importance of separating the people from the problem.
Oh, that's so important.
Because emotions can really derail a negotiation.
They can.
If you let them.
We need to be aware of those emotions.
And manage them effectively.
Right.
And then, of course, we talked about the importance of understanding the other side's interests.
Not just what they're saying, but why they're saying it.
What are their motivations?
Exactly. And once you understand those interests,
then you can start brainstorming.
Generating creative options.
Expanding the pie.
Finding those mutually beneficial trades.
And don't forget about objective criteria.
Oh, yeah, that's a good one.
Using things like market value or industry standards to ground the negotiation.
To make it more objective.
Right, because it's not just your opinion versus their opinion.
Here's something concrete to refer to.
And of course, we can't forget about our BATNA.
Our best alternative to a negotiated agreement.
Our safety net.
Knowing that we have other options gives us leverage.
And the confidence to walk away from a bad deal.
Exactly.
And finally, we touched on those dirty tricks.
The underhanded tactics.
That some people use in negotiations.
And we talked about ways to counter those tactics.
Without getting derailed ourselves.
Staying focused on the goal.
So much good stuff in this book.
It's a classic for a reason.
I always learn something new every time I read it.
Me too. It's full of insights.
So there you have it, your crash course in getting to...
Yes.
We covered a lot of ground.
From the core principles.
To the human element.
The importance of interests over position. The power of creative options.
And even how to deal with those tricky negotiators.
I think we gave our listeners a lot to think about.
I hope so, and hopefully some tools that they can use.
To feel more confident in their own negotiations.
But remember, knowledge without action is like a book left unread.
That's a good point.
So what's one thing our listener can take away from this deep dive?
That's a good question.
And put into practice in their next negotiation.
I would say pick one principle that resonated with you.
Okay.
And really focus on applying it.
That's a great idea.
It could be something as simple as asking why more often.
To uncover those underlying interests.
Exactly.
Sometimes a small shift in your approach can make a world of difference.
It really can.
Well, on that note,
Yeah,
we're going to wrap things up here.
it's been a great conversation.
It has, and we'll be back next time with another deep dive.
I'm looking forward to it.
But before we go, here's a final thought for you to ponder.
I'm listening.
What if the most important negotiation you ever have is the one you have with yourself?
Oh, that's interesting.
About your own worth.
I like that.
Food for thought.
It is.
Until next time, happy negotiating.
See you then.